Buenas and half a day, Hamza todos and Tori Tata Guåhan, Manekano Castina Committee meeting, Situs Moasi. Good morning to everyone and welcome to your Congress building. Today, the Committee on Finance and Government Operations is now called to order at 0904. And this is on June 18, 2025. First notice of this public hearing was disseminated to all senators and media outlets on June 11, 2025, with its second notice disseminated on June 15, 2025. The hearing notices were also made available on the Guam Legislature's website, our legislative calendar, and the Government of Guam's public notice portal. The committee will now hear Bill number 44-38 COR, introduced by the Committee on Rules by the request of Magaʹhågan Guåhan, the Governor of Guam, in accordance with the Organic Act of Guam, an act making appropriations for the operations of the executive branch of the Government of Guam for fiscal year ending September 30, 2026, making other appropriations and establishing miscellaneous and administrative provisions. Relative to the Department of Revenue and Taxation, joining me for this hearing this morning, to my right, of course, is the Vice Chair of this committee and our Vice Speaker, Senator Tony Yada. Thank you for joining us. Thank you. Also, Senator Therese Talahi and Senator Tello Taidagui, who is also a co-chair of Department of Revenue and Taxation, along with myself. Those testifying on Bill number 4438 COR relative to the Department of Revenue and Taxation, please take a seat at the table, which they have. Good morning, Ms. Marie. Just to let you know, prior to reading some of our housekeeping items, the format that I've been going by is to go with the director or whoever is the head of the department or agency, and then I will allow you to introduce your panel and whether or not they will be testifying in the opening, or whether they will be here in support of any questions that any senators or members of the body may choose to ask. So, after I do this housekeeping, we'll get started with you, Ms. Marie, and thank you for being here this morning. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone in attendance of the Legislature in Guåhan's general rules of conduct. Individuals testifying shall be first recognized by the chairperson before speaking and shall state their full name for record-keeping purposes. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance and nature of the bill on the agenda. Personal inferences to the character or motive of any senator or individual testifying are not permitted. The chairperson of the committee may order removal from the hearing of any member of the Legislature in Guåhan or the public audience who fails to observe proper decorum pursuant to the 38th Guam Legislature standing rules. Immediate removal from the public hearing room is possible if the rules are not adhered to. At this time, as is traditional within our legislature, and particularly with the 38 legislature's rules, again, is a swearing in whenever we do but hearings which involve finance or budgetary matters. So I'd like to ask the panel to please rise and be sworn in by our Sergeant at Arms.
Please raise your right hand. Under penalty of perjury, do you affirm that any and all information you provide today, whether it be verbally, electronically, and in writing, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes. Mr. Chair, you may proceed.
Thank you, Sarge. And Director Marie Lezama, once again, thank you for being here today. And so now we will turn the floor over to you and to make your presentation for Department of Revenue and Taxation. Sizu Usmasi.
Buenas and half a day, Mr. Chair, Vice Speaker Ada, Senator Terlahi, and Senator Taidagui. And I just want to, we prepared short slides, or a few slides, and want to make sure that that's going to be okay. My name is Marie Lezama. I am the Director of the Department of Revenue and Taxation. And to my right, I have the Banking and Insurance Commissioner, as well as the Acting Deputy Director, Michelle Santos. To my left, I do have Mikel Espiritu. Mikel was instrumental in working on the budget data that has been presented to you. As you can see, our request is the same as that of fiscal year 2025. While it is actually our desire to request for a higher amount, we are cognizant of the looming federal cuts and its impact, or their impact, to the government of Guam's overall budget. Despite challenges and sometimes having limited resources, our agency employees continue to work hard to uphold our mission statement and effectively serve the people of Guam. So I will turn to the slides first. Next slide, please. As you will see, we've updated our organizational chart, and again, we want to remind everyone that we have over 20 different branches under certain divisions. Next slide. So what have we done in fiscal year 2025? At last year's budget hearing, it was brought up that we had way too many limited term appointment employees. And so what we've done in this past year is we've reduced that number, and I'm happy to say that actual LTAs is at 16, or about 10% of our workforce, and that we have some retirees that have returned. We have the MICSAP, or the Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Program, which has some unclassified employees. And then we have a couple of special project coordinators. But overall, the LTA count has been reduced. And we've also filled some vacant positions. I'm happy to say that part of the efforts to reduce, or the outcome of the reduction of limited term appointments has been in the form of their rating and going through the process of the interview process and being hired for classified positions. We have finally ordered and received tobacco stamps. That's what we consider part of phase 1 of the complying with that act. And I'll get to phase 2 in just a second. We've conducted inspections that have resulted in fines and fees, temporary seizure of products, and some closures. And those are alcohol related and bed and breakfast, or B&B related. As you can see on the B&B side, we conducted 8 investigations thus far, which resulted in $5,000 in fines collected. We started, and I believe this was also a discussion that was at last year's, it might have been Senator Perez. We started an internship agreement with UOG's College of Business and Public Administration, specifically in the accounting area. So, as you're aware, we continue to struggle with recruitment and retention, and we're hoping that this will kind of start the ball rolling with regard to that effort. And then finally, we continue to issue tax returns or tax refunds within 6 weeks, an average of 6 weeks from filing date. So we continue with those efforts. Next slide, please. So we still have a lot to do, particularly in the business privilege tax branch. That branch has been the subject of many draft legislation. And with that said, it's a branch where historically, it's been high with regard to, again, the problem of recruiting and retaining. It's, at this time, as I mentioned in another hearing, there are only 2 full-time employees there, but and currently supplemented by 2 additional employees from other branches. So we continue to struggle in that area, which has typically had a high turnover rate, and we are trying to address that. So we did, as part of the BPT efforts, though, we completed the second part, or we need to continue with the second phase of tobacco stamps, and that's where we had given the wholesalers the opportunity or time to order their equipment, their applicators, if you will. And so we are entering that stage now. I believe one of the wholesalers has already received their applicator. We know that there's an issue with alcohol, and that is something that we need to concentrate on. I know that the public auditor has expressed concerns about that, and we need to ensure that we put something in place that will at least provide some kind of reassurance. some kind of reassurance, at his level. The same thing with use tax. We do have an issue, we would like to clean up the use tax area. And again, we will do that once we get the branch additional employees. And we did start a discussion with Customs, and we hope to resume discussions with Customs on how to enhance the current process with regard to the, the arrivals or the shipments. Motor Vehicle Division. We know that driver's license has been and continues to be a work in progress. It is difficult. The employees try their best. They're mentally, tapped out. And some of that is perhaps, it's things that, we can't control. A few months ago, we did have a power outage that affected our aging system. And then a few days later, there was an expired certificate on the vendor side. And so we had to try to accommodate the overflow, and we opened several Saturdays later to be able to accommodate that overflow. And so we recognize that we need to commence efforts to procure a new system and, just go from there. It is, and I've said this before, in other jurisdictions across the nation, DMVs unfortunately have, their reputations precede them. And so it's no different here. However, we are going to do what we can to improve upon that process so that we don't run into the same long lines that wrap around the building and so forth. And we're fortunate it hasn't wrapped around the building just yet, but there have been long lines. We will admit that. With regard to the vehicle registration area, we want to explore electronic titling. And there are things such as mobile driver's licenses, although I think that that's kind of later on down the line. We want to make sure that we address the issues that are before us. So continuing on with what we want to do. We want to continue to right-size the staffing and address critical vacancies. We do need a taxpayer advocate. I mentioned this last year, and unfortunately, we have not been able to fulfill this just yet. So like the IRS, or as with the IRS, the taxpayer advocate, it's an independent entity that actually resolves issues with taxpayers, issues that they can't resolve on their own. And so we are moving, or we would like to move toward that. In addition, we need a compliance and audit officer. Basically, it's just someone who can ensure that any outside regulatory and legal requirements are met and that our internal policies support that. Next slide. So continuing on, we do want to continue with the compliance inspections. Last year we conducted, or we had a couple of people from the IRS come and do revenue officer training. And this year we want to focus on the revenue agent training. We want to be able to implement or carry out more cross-utilization of our employees. We had a few educational awareness campaigns, and we want to be able to continue that. We've commenced the cleanup of and streamlining of our websites, and there's still more to do. We ideally would like something that's just easy to read, easy to follow, and will provide information such that the taxpayers or customers will know what they need to bring or do. We want, of course, move with digitizing or move toward automating some of the processes that we use at our agencies. We want to continue to collaborate with our interagency partners. So we've collaborated with some, as I mentioned, customs. We recently worked with the Department of Administration to help carry out their transformation from traditional check and envelope payments to that of the microchecks. And we want to also work with our regional counterparts. Most recently, we've been visited by the CNMI with regard to the driver's license real ID requirements. And we've also been approached by Pohnpei with regard to our weights and measures, the possibility of our having weights and measures staff train them in similar procedures. And finally, we want to, I take that back. I want to continue to leverage our organizational memberships, and that would include the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators, or AMVA. And finally, but not least, we want to focus on our employees' mental health and well-being. Working at the Department of Revenue and Taxation, no one's ever been known to make lots of money working there. So if you're still there after all these years, it's you love the work, you believe in the work, and you do that despite not being paid on a level as you would another agency that doesn't even require the technical expertise. So, with that, what I would like to talk about is I respectfully ask that a provision for DRT to use any unexpended FY 2025 funds be included in the budget law. And in closing, while our agency's role is typically not to draft legislation, we are always affected by legislation that concerns us. In crafting future legislation, we ask that you meet with us to determine feasibility first, and in addition to any fiscal impact it may bring. And with that, thank you very much for your attention and for our opportunity to present or to talk about our budget.
Ms. Marie, and I thank you for your presentation, and many of the items I know will be addressed by my co-chair as well, and I'll be going to my vice speaker and vice chair first. But the main thing I wanted to recognize is, yes, we thank you for recognizing the current tracking of revenue in the government and what will be available for agencies. Once again, a number of agencies have come before us requesting, in addition to what the ceiling has been set by the governor. The tracking for the governor, or the governor's request right now, has not equalized in terms of the $44 million in addition to this current fiscal year's budget. So many agencies, much like yourself, are facing a status quo budget, with the exception of the inclusion of the mandatory increases, which is, of course, predominantly right now the health care needs, and then the also needs for retirement. A little bit of good news, it looks like from retirement, it looks like the actuarial is going to come down by about 1%. So we're going to have a number for that soon in terms of how that will affect the overall budget. But yeah, so I'm thankful. You are currently, I believe, tracking somewhere around 800,000 and probably going to close out the year, as we discussed in the pre-budget meeting, at about 600,000 in lapses. And I'm certain that that's due to your recruitment and retention issues. So I think that, is appropriate for this status quo budget, at least for this fiscal year. The other thing I'd like to mention is that, the carryover revenue, I know that's going to be a persistent request. And, we can look at it a couple of different ways. But traditionally, I just want to let agencies know, traditionally, it's not really additional revenue. The ceiling is set for the next fiscal year that you incur. It really is going to be up to cash management from the administration's position. I just don't want you to think of it as, if there is that provision, that it's actual cash in additional revenue. The truth is that normally what happens is if that carryover revenue comes in, that's what gets used first. And then as the fiscal team goes throughout the fiscal year, imposes their reserve and gets towards the end of the fiscal year, they'll release depending on the need, and they'll release based on how the budget is tracking. So I know it's a nice thing a lot of times for agencies, but I just want to be clear that the reality is most of the time it does not equate to additional revenue. It might equate to some additional appropriation authority, but I wouldn't bank on it as additional revenue to the agency. I usually caution most agencies of that, but we'll see what happens in the markup process of the budget and what happens on the floor. But certainly. So I just wanted to kind of address the revenue side. I just wanted to kind of address I just have one question, particularly the persistent discussion of recruitment and retention when it comes to, in particular, the BPT section. Have you done a study, or how are your exit interviews going with your employees in terms of, or are they laterally transferring out into either other agencies or within the department just because of the stress level of that, and see how we can work with you to manage that better. But like I said, it's not a budgetary issue. Clearly, you have the ability to hire. But can you give us some more insight maybe on internally how the agency department has been trying to figure that out, and what are some of the surveys with the employees that are going out, especially if they're not going somewhere else, you know what I mean? If they're not going to the federal government, or if they're not taking a job somewhere else, but maybe they're going to the government somewhere else, and the like, some information based on that.
So with regard to BPT in particular, we did have someone who actually left to go to the private sector. There is, unfortunately, I think we had one death. It is certainly a very stressful area. And, the people that are there, they try, but, it's also the area that is affected by, any change in legislation. It's usually that area. And so personally, I think that the people that have left, and in addition to that, some of them have actually become classified employees. They were LTAs, and then they become classified employees in other branches. But the fact that the branch is the one that is most involved, or is typically involved in any legislation, it means that the employees there constantly have to pivot. When you finally learn what the law is, and then something else gets changed, it's something that can certainly add to the stress and the pressure, that is there. With that said, I think the other thing is the salary level. For whatever reason, the salary level in that particular branch isn't enough for someone, it's not enticing enough for someone to come in and kind of do. We have had packets for vacancies. We've had people actually turn down, the interview times and so forth. So we are hoping that we can make some change, some internal changes that will perhaps maybe have others want to at least try it out. It's just typically known as a branch that is harder to work at as opposed to, any other branch at the agency. And Michelle and Mikkel are here to basically provide any answers to some of the questions you may have. But if Michelle would, I don't know if either of them would have any additional comments to make.
Yeah, I'd certainly like to hear it. I mean, this, let's be honest with ourselves. This is the mother's milk, right? Of along with other tax collections you have. But let's be clear too. I mean, other taxes are pretty basic. I mean, when you have income tax, it's a formula. That those employers know, they know what they have to remit. Now, of course, with BPT, I understand you have exemptions. And so it can become complicated. You have also situations where you have, times where businesses will float, particularly in, economic times that are evolving, right? Float between, how well the business is doing and whether they're completely exempt and then going into exemptions. And I understand there's some complexity there, but it just doesn't seem to me to be that much of a science. And so one thing that you just mentioned, if there really is a need and the salary levels, you have that tool, that above step recruitment tool, to be able to bring people in order to deal with that salary variance, desk audits, things like that. But yeah, Ms. Santos, maybe if you can help us understand a little bit more and some insight, and Mr. Mikel, if you'd like to as well. Please identify yourself for the record before giving testimony.
Michelle Santos, I'm the Banking and Insurance Commissioner. I'm also the Acting Deputy Director. With business privilege tax, we've also had some significant retirements. People that, were with us a long time, and when they left, it left a big gap. But this branch, we assist the taxpayer with, a lot of them have to come down to file online because they don't have a computer at home. So we assist them in this way. We also, this branch also assists with bonding. They have to go out to the wholesalers and, watch the transfer of the cigarettes from the bonded warehouse to the regular warehouse. We keep track of that. So this branch in particular takes care of that. So it adds to the stress of, first of all, not having enough people on board and then having to do that as well. We do get the other branches to assist and, the other tax branches to come and help with taxpayer service. So we work together, but it's still, I don't know, DOA does the rating of these applicants, right? And then we interview them, but a lot of them don't, they apply for the job, but they don't take the position when they're selected. So there's not much we can do about that. But, those to me are some of the problems we've had with a BPT. Thank you.
Okay. So one thing I hear there is the issue with regard to you have retirements, so you're having difficulty replacing. My understanding is you are doing some contract work with prior employees that will accept to come back on a contractual basis. Is that true?
Yes, yes.
Okay. The other thing, yeah,
there's none in this branch.
not in that branch.
Currently, no.
Okay. So they don't want to, or you haven't made the offer?
Well, when the last few retirements, they didn't want to.
Okay.
They were tired, and they've had well over 30 years service, so they just wanted to stay home, be with their family, and not, yeah.
Totally understand that.
Yeah, if they would come back, we would consider it,
Okay.
simply because there isn't that pool of people to choose from, and if they want to come back, that would be great for us. We don't need to train them, they could train others, but yes, we would take them back.
Yeah, the other thing I hear here, and I think there's two other things. The other thing I hear is because we are on the cusp of the tobacco tax stamp implementation, and I have spoken with one company that's prepared and ready to go, so your presentation is correct, Ms. Marie. That should take a big burden off of the bonded warehousing. Once that stamp is implemented, you should have that should become automatic now that they have to apply the stamp and you're issuing, right, as opposed to having to work with wholesalers and the like and go and open the barn and let the boxes out and whatever else. And so that should be something that should alleviate. Mikel, you got any observations?
Yes, hi, my name is Mikel Espiritu. I'm the Management Analyst 3 for the department. And regarding BPT, there's currently only 2 classified employees for the area. It's the supervisor is been on a continuous open recruitment but due to the recruitment difficulties, it has been difficult to fill that position.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, you know, Maria, I would right now, along with your driver's license division, I would mark this as your top issue right now. And I don't, you know, like I said, my last thing I want to mention is, you know, our government is really famous for going to trainings, and we're really famous for, you know, funding travel and going abroad and getting training. You know, the elephant in the room, which is not an elephant in the room, you know, the governor vetoed the visible tax, and that's fine. We'll continue to talk. But, you know, Marie, one thing I understand about, you know, talking to the agency and getting the information, but the other thing the legislature does a lot of times too is they put a very long implementation time in so that they can work, so the agency can work through these things. I know the states that we identified, that, and especially Hawaii, as well as a couple other states that are still on a business privilege tax scheme. I mean, it seems to me like we could easily do some training with them. It doesn't seem like it would be, you know, rocket science. Many businesses keep sending me in their photos now, I can forward them to you, that they just went ahead and did it already. Their POS system was up to date and everything else. It was a field that already existed. They activated it, and but, you know, I'm not here to debate that. I want to mention to you that I understand, you know, many of our other colleagues, they like to do this too, so I guess I get to do it. But, you know, the thing is that many other places do this, and it's not rocket science, like I said, and we give time for implementation. So, but we'll see where it goes from here. But I just want to, you know, say that when we identify a problem within an agency and a critical area such as this, seems to me that the emphasis is really going to have to be put on that, whether or not there's a visible BPT or not. The bottom line is that division is so critical, and like I said, you know, it seems to me like if there's more attractive offerings such as training, additional training, and you know, above step recruitment. You know, it seems to me like that can be a solution to unlocking the key to that, you know, that mystery. Okay? So aside from that, I appreciate the work that you're doing. Yes, go ahead, Marie.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to, you know, indicate that with regard to the implementation of bills that have become law, sometimes it involves third party. So it'd be a vendor. And sometimes the vendor, it is difficult for the vendor to keep to the timeline that has been set. And then you mentioned training. Our training, and particularly with the revenue officer training we carried last year, we brought them out here, right? Everybody wants to go off island for training, but we actually brought the revenue officers or the people who were conducting the revenue officer training here. We expect that the same will happen with the revenue agent training, although that may suffer some kind of setback due to the fact that the IRS has recently, you know, released thousands of employees. So we are hoping that we can get that, you know, done. I can tell you, I'm probably the director that maybe has traveled once since I've joined the agency. And not that I joined because of travel, you know, but agency-wide, our agencies don't go. In fact, the trips that have occurred are under the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators. Our membership entitles or is such that they give us like 2 trips a year, fully paid for, you know, 1 or 2 attendees depending upon what the conference is about. And the only other ones really that travel, I mean, of course, there's the insurance and banking area, and then there's the Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Program, which is completely funded by the feds. So,
you know, Marie, I'm glad you brought that point up, because maybe what we'll start doing now is we'll announce that DRT is the model of how to bring people to Guam to train, because I tell you, there's other agencies right now, their travel is $1.5 million, $2 million a year. So I'm going to start making sure that I announce that Department of Revenue and Taxation really is the model for how to ensure that your entire division can receive training and you don't need to travel. You can bring, those individuals here to be able to do that. I'm sure it won't be in every case, but I think we need to make an example of your success. Because
it is successful, if I might add. We also invite the islands. We invited CNMI. They attended the revenue officer training. That went on for like 2 weeks, so 2 or 3 weeks, and so that was very successful. But we do invite the islands. If we can help in any way, we say yes, and we set up a program, they come. But with IRS, that's a little bit more rigid, but they did come. It was very successful.
That is great news and something great to report today. One thing, Marie, also with implementation, I know that, and what's required, right, in terms of vendors and third party. Here's another thing. This is the magic process, the budget. We have miscellaneous provisions in any law that's been enacted. And if that could be actually part of your testimony on an annual basis when you come in and writing us letters saying we cannot comply with this because we're having difficulty with third-party vendor. You don't have to, you would still be in compliance in the law when you demonstrated that. And we can simply extend those timelines within the budget. All kinds of things happen in the miscellaneous provisions. In fact, sometimes we even change authorities with departments and authorities in terms of whether or not they can spend their money or whether or not their board has to. So there's a lot of nice things that happen in the budget process too. Now, of course, it would just be for that year, but it can happen again in the subsequent year as well. So there's a lot of things the legislature can do with you that a policy that's enacted doesn't have to be rigid. That's exactly why, we go in and introduce these bills all the time or allow the budget process to include language that brings flexibility to the policies that we pass in this body. Because we're a very understanding people as well. That's why I'm trying to hammer down on this because, like I said, as far as I'm concerned, between this and the driver's license division and license registration, I love the fact that you're looking at that automation for title. That is really smart. Everything you've done, your team has done up there, Marie, with regard to automation, has been wonderful. That is another, a hallmark of Department of Revenue and Taxation from my perspective. As a taxpayer, as a small business owner, talking to others, I'm telling you, the ability to file BPT, the driver's license, when it can be renewed online, everybody is just so ecstatic about that. And I can see even by driving by, your traffic and the like has gone down, and just the physical traffic of people coming in and out. I've really seen a lot of success. So let's continue to accentuate that, and I congratulate you and your team for that. So with that, at this time I'll go to my co-chair, or we share duties with Rev and Tax. Senator Teidig, you recognize. Before I do that, real quick, I'd like to also thank Senator Sabrina Salas-Montanante, Senator Gumatato, and Senator Barnett for joining us this morning. Please proceed, Senator Teidig.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning to my colleagues, and good morning, everyone from Rev and Tax who are here. Appreciate you being here this morning. I'm sorry, Maria, I didn't get the gentleman who's sitting to you, his name?
Magaʹhågan Espiritu.
Respirito.
Magaʹhågan.
Espiritu. And what do you do, sir? And just state your name for the record.
Off-a-day Senator, Magaʹhågan Espiritu, assigned as a Management Analyst 3. I help with the budget and with the administration side. I was formerly detailed in an acting capacity as the Administrative Services Officer. And right now, we're currently in recruitment for that position.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Yeah, we always like to know who the new faces are and get to know who to talk to when we have to call Rev and Tax if we need anything. So You know, I greatly appreciate you coming here with the same budget requesting status quo, but it makes me wonder when everyone else is coming in front of us saying that they have organic growth, increase in their insurance, you know, that they have to take into consideration, as well as not only insurance but retirement. Have you taken that into consideration, and how are you going to cover those areas of organic growth?
Well, actually, if you take a look at the budget, right, there are quite a few of vacant but funded positions, or positions that are currently, there's a recruitment in progress or process. But, you know, the reality is, while we would love for all of those to be instantaneously filled, we also know, and the OFB has also pointed out that, hey, you need to kind of address that, ensure that that, you know, is completed before you actually ask, you know, for more. So,
how much is that, Maria? Can you tell me that if you're not going to fund those areas and you're putting them out of the mix, okay, how much money is that you're saving to cover the organic growth? Marie. Yes, Marie. Sorry. Marie.
I'm sorry, I did not calculate that. I do have the, I will probably have to get back to you on that. I have the list, but I didn't calculate the figures for all of that.
So this will be based on FY25, the current year that we're in right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that in FY26, you are going to no longer request for those particular positions, and that's why there's going to be a savings, mm-hmm, and that's the number that I'm going to need to know.
Okay. I will calculate that and get.
And then it'll explain to us where that savings is coming, and if because it you know, coming here in front of us with the same budget, you know, we've got to come up. Well, we just have to figure how you got there. Okay. The other question I had is, you know, when you're looking at the special funds, we noticed that in that area you've increased it a bit in special funds in order to offset some other areas. And I'm looking at tax collections enhancement funds, and there is an increase of about $38,000. And then the one for Better Public Service Fund, there's an increase of about $24,133. Now, currently, we're looking at FY24. There has been no, you know, change. It's tracking on that fund, on the Better Public Service Fund. It's tracking well. In fact, I think it was like 14,000 over its estimated projected revenues. However, the Tax Collection Enhancement Fund, you know, currently there's a shortage in that particular fund. So in FY24, I know that there was no issue, but FY25, we're already tracking in the Tax Collection Enhancement Fund, a shortage. So there might be a short fall in that. So I ask that you keep an eye on that, because if it doesn't come through, you know, you're going to have to find a way to subsidize that funding. Okay. And you did get your full allotment from both the Tax Collection Enhancement Fund and Better Service, along with banking and insurance. All those three special funds all came in to par. Okay. I also noticed that you have 3 attorneys. 3, that's awfully nice to have that many attorneys in one agency. And it makes me question, is it really that much? And looking at your explanation as to what each attorney does, I think that there could be some change. I also noticed that these 2 attorneys received a raise of $7,972 for one, and another one at $7,536 increase in salary for 2 particular attorneys. Can you tell me what this raise, what justification for this raise?
I believe that was in line with the attorney pay plan. So,
but the other attorney did not. Okay, so one attorney was in the line of the pay plan and 2 were not.
Yeah, well, and let me just verify, you know, with Mikkel, but yes, that would that would have been the main reason for that.
But that happened in 2024, though. The payment pay plan was 24, not 25. I mean, 26, because you're requesting in your budget that there will be an increase for these two particular attorneys, each over $7,000 each. And I'm trying to figure out why all of a sudden now, because this pay plan happened.
Then that would likely, ma'am, be tied to their salary increments.
I'm sorry?
That would likely be tied then to their salary increments.
Would you have any issues with only two attorneys being able to cover rev and tax? I mean, in the past, you've never even had one, right? And then you have the Attorney General's office assisting you, and now you have three. So would rev and tax be okay with only two attorneys instead of three?
Of course, I'm going to be selfish and say I prefer to have all three.
But would it still be able to function?
It would be difficult, but again, going back to, your recognition that, they do different functions, I just want to kind of repeat that. We have the principal income tax attorney who handles a lot of our HR and procurement issues. We have one who is involved with the consumer division and actually works with our regulatory administrator on many of those issues. And then we have a litigator. And as you know, we get sued all the time. It's just the nature of the agency.
The income tax attorney, is this individual a certified, regular, classified as a true income tax attorney? Because I've never...
So she does, none of them have a tax LLM.
None of them are tax attorneys.
None of them. And it is difficult to find an attorney with a tax LLM who would like to come out of private practice and work in the public sector. With that said, we recognize that we are lucky, and we are certainly grateful that the late Senator Klitsky formed the office, and that we were finally able to fill that office. There's certainly no shortage of work. It helps greatly that we have the attorneys at our fingertips. Wherein before, when we would have to call the Attorney General's office, it was really based on whether or not the attorney was available. To some it may seem like a luxury. For us, just because of the type of work and all the issues that come our way, it certainly has been very beneficial to us.
Yes, it's definitely, you hit it on the nail when you said luxury. It is a luxury. At this point, the contractual service, I noticed, is $1.35 million in FY24. However, it's gone under $500,000 for FY26. How are you attributing this to this contracted service contractor?
Okay. Of course, so based on the ceiling and, just the budget constraints in general, what we've done is we've had to kind of shift some of that amount elsewhere within the budget. But with that said, as we continue through the fiscal year, then what typically happens is there are modifications that are made and amounts moved. So it really was just to show or for us to not exceed the cap.
That being said, if it's substantially lower from contractual services, what is the update on the Verados contract that you have now?
So the Veridos, which is the driver's license, or Veridos, the driver's license vendor. What we have right now, we have one of the employees working on a bid. We mentioned earlier that we currently don't have a contract, and we are trying to put it out properly, have it out for bid, and then proceed with that. So
that's my concern too, because, you know, looking at the downfall from the contract service from 1.35 to 500,000, below 500,000 now currently, you still have that situation with this contract that's needed to be put in place, correct? So there's going to come a time you're going to come out over here and ask for some funding for a new contract.
So actually, we have been, as part of the AMVA membership, we have other jurisdictions that are part of that group. And within that group, there is one jurisdiction, it's the state of Arizona, that has offered their new system coding to us for free. But as we work on the process, what has arisen is, while we may get the coding for free, we will still need to address the issue of maintenance. So it's not a 100% guarantee that we are going to go in that direction, but we are taking steps to ensure that we enter into some kind of arrangement so that we can effectively transition over to what possibly could be an agreement between the state of Arizona and the government of Guam.
Right, and one of the biggest issues that happens when you're procuring for a contract is the hours of working hours, because the difference between the U.S. mainland and here, and we're finding out these notices that are coming out from Reverend Tax that things are shut down because they can't get a hold of the vendor, because the time, you know, is at a different time. That's what I was told. And when things are shutting down, you know, we talk about trying to ease up the long lines. Well, that just adds more to the lines the next day and makes it very difficult for people who already have appointments. So I appreciate you working in that area and letting us know sooner than later with regards to the cost of that, because that is coming down the pipeline. So it's something that you need to make sure that you bring to the attention of the Oversight Chair of Appropriations this concern. That's going to be needed. And one of the most important things that I think that's really needed, especially by this body, is testimony. Testimony that comes in at a time that we need to review information and data in order to move legislation forward. This is something that seems to be always late. You know, with Reverend Tax, I mean, you do show up, but you show up with no written testimony or the data that's required or the questions that need to be answered during a public hearing. So I appreciate, Marie, if you, you know, you're on top of that. There's somebody in the agency. You've got 3 attorneys. You know, maybe one of them can help write testimony on legislation. This is law, legislation that we can actually get sound advice so that we know how to move forward. Also, data and reports. Many times you come to the public hearing and we ask for information and data, and unless we keep following up with Reverend Tax asking for it, we don't get it. And it shouldn't be us. If we ask that we need this data information right away, then it should be given to us within at least 3 working days. You know, because we have to move forward. So I ask that testimonies come into. We had a public hearing last week. We're still waiting on your testimony. We want to go into these market meetings that we have with testimony that failed to meet it on the day of public hearing. So that's one of the biggest concerns. And I think a lot of times, too, we're finding out that testimony is needed by commissions, boards. And at Reverend Tax, currently right now, there are no quorum for the Alcohol Beverage Board, Real Estate Commission Board, Banking and Insurance Board. There is no quorum. In fact, in the Banking and I mean the Real Estate Commission, there's no one sitting on that board. No one.
You are correct, Senator.
Yeah, all these boards are empty, and it's been this way for a while. Some of them has been since 2023.
No, the Banking and Insurance Board.
No, I'm talking about Real Estate Commission.
No, I think in 2025 they all expired, and we've asked the governor's office to reappoint them.
Actually, I have a letter from you because I've asked for that information. and trying to push rev and tax as the oversight chair in these areas, to get these boards and commissions in place, because a lot of legislation is being stalled because we can't get a board there to give us their testimony, or laws that we've implemented that these commission board members cannot act on, or even provide the rules and regulations in order to give out license to individuals or to sanction anybody. So it's like no host bar right now at Rev and Tax. It's very disappointing because this has been happening since the beginning of this term. So I appreciate that you push hard on this and find it, because I think there is legislation that if the governor does not appoint, that the speaker of the legislature may have the authority to put individuals in these boards and commissions. So appreciate you looking into that, Marie. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Senator, if I may, with regard to late submissions or lack of testimony or whatever, and I apologize if I'm wrong, but I feel that coming here and testifying verbally is just that. It's a testimony. Now, whether you expect that to be in writing or not, perhaps, again, I apologize if I've confused the two. With regard to any data that may have been asked in the course of the discussion, that we certainly need time to go back and ensure that the data that we give to you is complete and it is accurate. And in many times, the people that are doing one project or trying to answer one inquiry are the same people that are trying to answer, whether it's the OPA's follow-up on recommendations for audits that were conducted perhaps 10 years ago. We have a lot of different deadlines. And the other part to my apology is I was made to understand that we can submit testimony X number of days. I was made to understand it was 10 days after testimony, after the hearing. And so if I've gotten that wrong, I will certainly correct that.
I appreciate that. And for the record, sometimes it's only 5 days. It's not just always 10. It depends on the committee chair. Secondly, we give you a notice, an invitation to testify 5 days before a public hearing. 5 days before one.
Yeah.
So it's not that we don't notify you, we do notify you. So
I'm not
it
saying
gives you
that.
enough time to get the information and data. To come in front of us without anything in writing makes it difficult for us, because especially knowing that you didn't provide any written testimony, that you're here to answer any questions, but yet when we ask the questions, I'm not going to linger on this anymore. We can go back and forth, but when we do ask the questions, we're met with one thing: I'll get back to you. It makes it difficult for everybody, especially when there's more questions that need to be asked because of a question that was asked.
And perhaps, if I may suggest, just so that it helps us, if you would, in that invitation, perhaps give us a little bit of insight as to what exactly, what in particular you would like to ask for. Because sometimes we come here, we feel that we're prepared, and then it turns out that there's a question that we certainly weren't prepared for. Okay. So
I appreciate
you're
that.
Right.
And the fiscal note that's provided by BBMR, a lot of times we get comments on there because they lacked information, or the agency or department didn't provide any information. We are unable to determine whether there's a fiscal impact. And that is by your own administrator, asking you the questions, and it fails on that part. So I'm not just talking that you're doing it to us, but it also goes on BBMR too.
Yes, and while you can also argue that many times we are not able to ascertain the fiscal impact because it doesn't include, it really is not data that we track. But your comments are noted, and
thank you so much for that. I appreciate you working on it. The last question I have.
Yeah, Senator, please wrap up. We are using the clock
last question,
today, and I'll
Mr.
allow
Chair.
for follow-ups.
Last question. Sorry, that kind of took longer. Sorry. Just the last question. I just noticed a huge difference on the rental. in FY25 at 1.13989, so 1.1 million, and then now it's only at 478.93. Can you just explain that? And that's my last question, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, McKellen and I had a discussion on that, and really part of the amount, and I told him it should have actually been fixed because rent is fixed, but part of that amount was actually reflected, or is actually reflected in the contractual dollar amount.
Susan Massey, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Before I go to the Vice Chair and the Vice Speaker, one thing I've been doing with all the agencies as they come in, and I guess I had some urgent questions earlier, but I wanted to make sure for the record, as you know, as the agency director, when you came in and others that have been with the department for a while, it really is in the fiscal years of 22 starting and then 23 and certainly 24 where there were significant increases in agency budgets. And that's because this legislature has been conservative and adopting conservative budgets, and so budgets have continued to commensurately come up with the appropriation levels. So just for the record, for our listening audience, the authorized, actually the expenditures and encumbrances in fiscal year 2024 totaled $15,100,196. Your authorized level currently for fiscal year 2025 is $17,735,489. And also, when we look at the variance between the 2026 request versus 2024, because you are a status quo budget, much like I told DOC yesterday, your net increase that is status quo from 2024 is $2,635,293. This also is, and I'll continue to do this during these budget hearings, the reason why the tracking no longer has that very large disparity. As you know, I believe in 2022 it was somewhere around 70 million, then 23 it inched up to around 90, 24 was like over 100 million. And this is why we're, mandating that we appropriate with audited revenues as well, because it's just really all over the place, right? So we've been very good in terms of recognizing the needs for the agencies. And so, the reality is that you probably have close to the same amount. In fact, I can do it right here. Yeah, you had, with your $15 million budget, basically in 2024, your total FTEs were 190. You actually are tracking below now at 184, and you have a lot of budgeted vacancies still within the department. And then fiscal 2026, you're looking to be at 190 again. And so, we feel as though we continue to have, very flexible budgets, but we'll deal with that when we come to the debate on the floor. But that's one of the reasons why, when a lot of times it's like, why aren't you asking for more? We have really come up in large percentage within the last 3 fiscal years. And so we're trying to make sure we hold the line and make sure that our taxpayers get their value as well. I'd like to also say hello to Senator Paris, who's joined us. Mr. Vice Speaker, I'm recognized at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to Director Lozama, Deputy Director Santos, and Mr. Espiritu, thank you for being here and for your presentation. I just have perhaps just a couple of questions. And you did, on your slide presentation, did say that in 2025, what you've done is the tobacco stamps ordered and received, and then I see in 2026, perhaps it might be the second phase, complete the second phase, and this perhaps is the implementation?
It's actually the wholesalers getting their equipment ready. Because when we told the wholesalers that the stamps had already been ordered and received, they needed their own equipment to be able to apply the stamps before they could purchase it from us.
Yeah, because I believe this law was in place for several years now.
It's a long time coming, yeah.
Yeah, so when do we hope to get the wholesalers online and in line with the implementation? And
I could be wrong, but I believe it's in somewhere around the start of the next fiscal year.
So around September, October, they should be able to start. Yeah. We should start seeing the tobacco stamps on the cigarettes. That's great to hear. The other issue the new driver's license systems for, I guess, we have problems with the real ID. Is that still in?
So with the real ID, you know, the issue that, and unfortunately the outage occurred, you know, right several days before the deadline for real ID. We found that there was a misconception out in the public. People who had valid passports, U.S. passports or foreign issued passports with, were under the impression that they had to get the real ID. And so despite our directing them to the TSA.gov website, which listed alternate forms of acceptable IDs, there was still that insistence to get the real ID. So of course, you know, we were faced with that. The issue that we do have right now with the real IDs, and this has actually been, it's a couple of years ongoing, and that is TSA here, if any of you have the real ID, or TSA, when they scan the real IDs, it doesn't show, right? And so the vendor has been working on that. We continue to follow up. It certainly is frustrating. What they needed to have done was uploaded specimens of the credentials to TSA. But from what I understand, they're pretty much at the tail end of that. I did call TSA and I asked, I said, will that be a problem come May 7? You know, this was before the implementation date. And they said no. They said that if something doesn't scan, the person will just simply go through a secondary screening of sorts, which is a physical inspection of the card. So there are still some things out there. We've heard that others, and it's probably those that got their credentials a few years ago, there are others who have no issues with the ID scanning. You know, we're dealing with a vendor that at one point in time, it was valid. It's called Valid. And so they were absorbed by a company called Veridos. And so, you know, it's something, some of the tickets, if you will, you know, with regard to issues that need to be addressed have carried over. And because there were transitional challenges, you know, we have to keep at it with them to ensure that those issues are top of mind and that they become addressed.
So then when a new system for the driver's license branch comes into play, will the current real IDs that have already been issued be recognized by the new system? And would they have any issues moving forward?
So what I failed to include in my earlier testimony is that we are likely going to need an agreement that will enable us to kind of transition over to any, whether it's the Arizona Max or any other vendor. You know, we will likely need that transition and therefore ensure that everything is migrated over.
Okay.
Yeah.
And because of your status quo budget, do you foresee perhaps in the future opening up a second location for driver's license issuance?
So I know people have asked about that. We did have it at one point in time. And I believe what happened was right before COVID, the secondary location, the lease had been up for renewal. And we had issues with that. We had a lot of complaints being that the air conditioning wasn't turned on until the stores were open at 10, you know, or what have you. But that what we wanted to do or we had hoped to do has now been affected by, you know, we were working with the Office of Infrastructure, and we had been granted monies to procure like mobile service, if you will, something that we could take to the mayor's offices and so forth. You know, unfortunately, we received word that has been scrapped. So now we have to kind of organize our thoughts, you know, and so forth. at one point in time, we did ask, although that may be moot now, by the way, thanks to Speaker Bloss's bill with regard to military. The idea was perhaps, since there was a Pass an ID office up north, right outside Anderson, and Pass an ID office down south, that perhaps we can enter into an MOU with JRM and we could have a presence there, and it would effectively serve the military communities in those areas as well as the northern and southern populations. But you know, that kind of didn't go anywhere. We are hoping instead now to try to reach out to the mayoral offices and see if perhaps, you know, because we've always been trying to push the online renewals and so forth. Perhaps if we work with them to, much like what happens at business privilege tax, when people come in, they don't have computers, and for them to kind of work or help them navigate through our myid.guam.gov website, that will help to alleviate some of the congestion at our office in Magaʹhågan.
Okay, that's great to hear. Then also on you started an internship agreement with UOG. Have you done the same with GCC as well?
No, we haven't. Yeah,
it's probably something to look into, so that I guess, you know, the more applicants that are able to, you know, come out and join DRT, I think it's a beneficial.
You're right, and I think that's probably just a discussion that we will have, you know, with the Tax Enforcement Division and Taxpayer Service Division. But I think part of the reason why we didn't consider GCC at first is the requirements for the positions, you know, that we wanted to, you know, we wanted to try to recruit require a 4-year degree. So.
Yeah, I see. But as interns, right, I think it's something, you know, perhaps someone that's just looking at maybe a 2-year degree would change their mind and go for a 4-year degree based on what they learned and the experience they have in the revenue collection area. And I think it's very beneficial to Revenue Tax, because, you know, that's where the entire government revenues comes in. It's through Revenue Tax. So.
Yes.
And then, do you have any federal funds currently that haven't been expended, or?
So the only area that deals with federal funds is the Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Program. So they're the only ones in the agency that have federal funds.
Do they have any funds that have been unexpended or unobligated, or?
So last year or earlier this year, what transpired was we were coming up on having to close out FY2022. And so unfortunately, we did have to deobligate some of those funds, but that was because we had put in a request when we beat GSA's deadline. We put in the request for cubicles and I believe some vans. And unfortunately, the request, when we finally got word back from GSA, they said that there was an issue with the vendor. Vendor had changed, or the bidder rather. The bidder had changed something which negated the whole process. So we're hoping not to do that for this year. We do have some funds. I'm happy to say that we've been able to procure some large items, including some vans. And so I have to commend that group, Tim Lujan and that group, Katrina Hodges. You know, their budget at one point in time, or their federal funds, were about $300,000. It is now up to $800,000. So with that, we have plans, or there are plans to ensure that the you know, that the bay that they have is set up properly, and that they continue to do outreach and perhaps even expand some of the services that other similar or their counterparts in the U.S. Are able to do or have been doing.
Yeah, I hope so, because, you know, I just returned from D.C. and talking with our federal partners out there, and what they don't want to see is federal funds being returned. And I think it's important that, again, that we continue to move forward and find out what is it that's hampering the process of actually expending these federal funds.
Yeah.
One thing they did say is that you return the funds, it goes back to Treasury, and somebody else is going to get it. So what we need to do is all the federal funds that we do continue to receive is we need to ensure that we properly encumber it and expend it so that, the next time and the next grant cycle, things like that, we'll be able to receive the same or at least more and not see a reduction in what is given to us, right?
Noted. We have no intention of returning anything.
Yeah.
Our biggest hurdle right now is procurement.
Yeah, thank you for that, and we just hope to continue that and keep moving in forward. The last thing I just want to touch on here is the issuance of and continue to issue income tax refunds, and that's court mandated, and I'm glad that we're still keeping on that, and that the payout is coming right along. So thank you for the hard work that you and your team up at Department of Revenue and Taxation continue to do to ensure our compliance with the court order, and that we continue to move forward with that. So with that being said, Mr. Chairman, thank you for this opportunity to be here for the budget presentation for Department of Revenue and Taxation. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you, Vice Speaker and Vice Chair of the committee. Marie, one thing that the Vice Speaker was speaking to, and I've been mentioning this to DOA, because we continue to talk about these qualifications and, the applications and them managing a lot of the applications for the overall government of Guam. The one thing about GCC, they have the Work Keys program. And this is something that really, really accelerates and tests. And this is why, if you can communicate with them, yes, you might have a 4-year degree, but with that Work Keys, it really, tests the acumen of the student and where their strengths are. And it actually, benchmarks workforce readiness. And so the thing is, sometimes we need to spark the interest of our applicants as well by letting them know, hey, you scored this on the Work Keys. You're going through your 2-year degree. Rev and Tax, is hiring for a lot of these positions, and this is one of the prerequisites in terms of qualifying. We can start directing our people to those areas. That is the signature program. Mary and her team and others have put in several years ago. They take it to the high schools actually, and the high school kids do a lot of that Work Keys testing, so that they can have a idea for their future. So I encourage you, even though it's a 2-year program, to really work with GCC because you could probably attract more applicants that way.
Will do. And in fact, on a related note, we've actually participated in some educational outreach campaigns. We've done, the Guam Chamber of Commerce, and on the high school level, we've actually gone and participated in a couple of their career day events. So we would like to continue that into the next fiscal year. And, again, it's just really just trying to find the resources, the human resources to be able to carry that out. But it has always been our intent to educate the public about what we do, and, including ways for them to be able to, take care of their tax liabilities or their reporting.
Great, thanks, Marie. This time I recognize, as the order of arrival, Senator Chalahi, you recognize this time.
Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director and Deputy Director and Mikhail. And to all of the employees at Rev and Tax, thanks for all their work. I know they've got, let's just say, sometimes the long lines, they've got the mad rushes and all the deadlines that we have for taxes and everything. So they are customer service, they are the front lines of those things, and I'm sure heavily strained at times, so I really appreciate their work. So you said that, this budget request is status quo. You mentioned because you were cognizant of looming federal cuts, but it doesn't look like your federal cuts might affect your budget directly too much. Is that correct?
Yeah, we meant to the overall government of Guam budget.
I know. Okay, but you clarified very little federal, only one program receiving federal funds. All right. And then, but you do have an operational cost decrease by $625,000? Is that correct? but the employee costs went up by 533,000.
Yes, that was to account for, you know, the increments and, you know, the, I think at one point in time, or in another area, it was the cost, as the chair mentioned, the cost of the government's share of the increase in insurance premiums.
Right, so that's all personnel, right?
Yes,
But then on the operation side, you had a decrease, 625,000?
So we were trying to keep, and Mikkel can chime in if I'm incorrect about this, but we were still trying to, we were faced with the challenge of trying to keep within the cap. So we had to show a shift from one area to another. So that's what.
Are we decreasing any of our enforcement services or capabilities in that decrease?
No.
All right. The reason I'm asking is because when we were having discussions on the BPT, and I remember years ago, maybe when I first became a senator, that was 2018, when we were doing those big budget changes because of the taxes in federal taxes changes. We received reports from DRT after pushing quite a bit as to how much in taxes they might collect that were like formerly deemed uncollected or not collectible, and that they were going to go out on really a pursuit of those. Do we have anything like that we might look forward to at FY26, increased revenues based on increased collection of taxes over the normal?
So yes, I did have a discussion with the collection supervisor, and recognizing that, you know, the funds going into the government of Guam may be affected by what's happening nationally. We've already commenced the process to reach out to those, you know, and I believe they're called annual notices. So we've already done that, and there will be efforts to step up collecting.
All right. Are you able to give us an estimate that if those are fruitful, what we might?
We can certainly give that to you, you know, once those have actually start to come in.
Okay. And are you able with this budget to continue your audit and inspections that you think are necessary for the government of Guam?
Yes, I think we've done okay so far. You know, ideally, if we have the full staff, then we would like to concentrate on other areas, perhaps that we have not been able to, you know, conduct inspections on. But I'm confident that the team is able to continue. In fact, we have some other inspections coming up as well.
Okay, because that was something else they said that during that BPT discussion recently is some of the businesses said if we had just more enforcement, we would be collecting more from those who are not reporting or those who are under-reporting, and we would yield more revenue. But you're saying that work is done by the Business Privilege Tax Branch, or is that done by the Compliance Branch? Or
for the inspections, it's compliance.
Okay. And compliance is staffed?
Compliance is staffed, yes.
All right.
Yeah.
So would you anticipate more or kind of the same level of that type of work?
Yeah. We prefer, or we will do more. We just recently added another person to the compliance branch. So once we get her fully trained, then we expect that there will be more inspections to be done.
Okay, great. Because we have potential through revenue tax to increase our revenue when we need it right now, and including the use tax, as you said, the alcohol, and now the tobacco. Do you anticipate increased tobacco tax collections because of the stamps?
So I believe that was the intent of the bill, right, which became law. And, you know, of course, when it comes to reporting taxes, we rely, right, everybody, it's self-reporting. So I believe that the tax stamps will help. To what extent, I'm not very clear on, especially since, just like with income tax, right? You report, you self-report. I can't go and tell you that what you're reporting is wrong or incomplete or what have you. So we will continue with our educational campaigns so that people are aware of what they must report, and also that they're in compliance with, just having to report to us. So.
Right. So I think the other ideal from that law was supposed to be that your inspections at stores would be very simple. You'd go in, you'd look if they have stamps or not, and if not, then they have not come through the regular process, they have not reported to you, and the enforcement would be easier.
Are their inspections also include minors, selling to minors, other things? But yes, you're correct. It should minimize inspections.
All right, and you said you did 8 investigations on bed and breakfast, 2 notices of violations, fines $5,000 sounds so small. Probably not. That's probably the statutory mandate. Do you think that's too small or should be looked at based on what you saw?
Well, I think with regard to those types of inspections, I think, because the fines aren't, if I'm not mistaken, they're not as high perhaps, or as strict, if you will. Sorry, I'm just drawing a blank here. That, I think it's sufficient, for what, the inspection has uncovered. But, with that said, overall at the agency, or agency-wide, I think it's time, and we've started discussions on that. We've actually we are going to enter into discussions soon to kind of revamp the fees, any of the fees that we have at our agency. What those will be, I couldn't tell you right now, but it's certainly a discussion that we have said we would like to start.
All right, thank you. And your average is 6 weeks for tax refunds. This is a great improvement from years ago, so I'm very, very grateful. But is this your goal, 6 weeks? Or was it 30 days?
Yeah, we ideally, we'd like for it to be faster. It typically is faster, I should say, we go through these at the beginning of the year, right, when people are first able to file. Then, of course, there's this mad rush. There's usually a huge amount of people who are filing their returns. And then it starts to taper down. And so by the time the extension date of October 15 hits, we're not paying out as much, and therefore, or not processing as much, and therefore it becomes faster, or the time becomes shorter. So we just like to play it safe and say 6 weeks. I think the injunction says 6 months from filing, and which actually would be the April 15 deadline. But we just want to be conservative with our...
Do you find that you have prepared or processed your part and then it waits at DOA for the payments?
Yeah, so part of the process is we used to run the paper checks, and then the checks would go over to DOA for signature and preparation for mailing. And then now we've migrated over to the micro type checks, those checks with the perforated sides. And so, and it still, it still goes down to DOA for the appropriate signature. I couldn't tell you how long their process takes to complete that end of it, but we usually try to manage expectations and say, give it about 15 working days, because you also have to remember that there are thousands of checks that are going out, and that part of that process includes the U.S. postal system. So depending upon their workload, it could also be there could also be time given there or taken there.
All right. Revenue tax does procurement through GSA and personnel through DOA, correct?
Correct, yes.
But you said one of the lawyers is, their principal work is for HR and procurement, and then one is for regulatory, it helps at regulatory administration?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just curious about that because not every agency has that a lawyer for their HR and procurement that's going through DOA who has the lawyers for all of that.
So I should clarify, it's only recently, we absent an ASO. I did ask one of the attorneys to kind of help guide the team with regard to the procurement, any outstanding procurement projects, and so forth, or requests. And so that is what she's doing right now. A lot of us are pulling, look at Michelle. Michelle's banking and insurance commissioner, but she's also our acting deputy director. Mm-hmm. There are times where we are just doing things outside our normal course of work. So I just think it's been helpful to have her actually assist.
I'm sure it's helpful. I'm just, what about the regular? Because what we're looking for at Revenue Tax is maybe we're going to get with 3 attorneys increased collections, right? Or you said you are sued all the time, and that's what your litigators spending time with. But what about the reverse, the enforcement?
So with regard to that, where they assist, we've actually discovered some issues with some of the internal forms that we have, or even the external forms that we have. So, for example, the wording on a form was such that it left the door open for perhaps someone to be able to skirt his or her tax liability. So they've worked on that. The forms, we've worked on revamping policies, and that's policies for the nearly 20 branches or areas that we have. We're nowhere near finished, but we just feel that in doing that and cleaning all that up, that it will provide better clarity for the staff. There wouldn't be this, so-and-so told me something, and then I came the next day and I spoke to someone else in the branch and told me another thing. So we feel that it would help standardize, how we conduct business.
I'm sure those are all good practices and improvements. But you're looking to hire, you said, a compliance and audit officer to ensure outside regulatory and legal requirements and internal policies are met. Meanwhile, you have 3 lawyers. But what I really want to see is, like you said about the staff, if they've been working there for years, and if you're able to get them trained to fill these other positions, that they are able to move up in this, and that this is the work that they've dedicated their lives to doing. Can they be trained to fill these upward positions, or are they already able to do that? Because, my experience with these agencies is that they have become experts, right? From practicing over the years, and then new people come in, or even the lawyers are not as expert as these employees are necessarily in that very specialized work, and they have to catch up. So I just like to see these employees rewarded if they can to be filling these positions that come up. Sure. And otherwise, thank you for all the online changes. I appreciate all of those. Those are very helpful for I think, a lot of people. And we're even able to check statuses, so we don't have to keep calling, questioning. A lot of those things are very helpful. And so thank you, and keep it up. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Jalahi. Senator Sabrina Salas-Montanani, you're recognized.
Hafaday. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a few questions. What type of qualifications or training does an employee need to work at the Department of Revenue and Taxation, particularly in critical areas like tax processing, collections, compliance? And on average, how long does it take to get someone fully trained and productive? And the reason why I ask this is because if we're exploring right-sizing the government, one of the potential strategies could be reassigning employees from less work-intensive agencies to departments like DRT. where there's a high demand for manpower?
Yeah, and I guess we would be hopeful that they would actually want to come over, because our agency isn't exactly known for being a place to coast or to kind of chill, right? So, with regard to certain, with regard to certain positions, I mean, you do have the more technical ones, right? You have the ones in exam. You have the revenue agents. Revenue agents must have an accounting degree. They must have knowledge of income tax. And so that is where we actually have some problems, or with regard to recruitment and retention. With regard to the others, we do have some customer service positions that are designated for the agency. And those really, I couldn't speak for how they're rated, because that lies at the DOA level. But basically, you have a high school diploma or equivalent, I would assume, and then just some work experience. And I do have to add, by the way, I apologize for going off on a tangent here, but we do take advantage of the Department of Labor's work experience program, and I believe there's something else called CWEP. CWEP. And what it is it exposes people who do not have job experience, to the working world, right? And you kind of get them trained on soft skills and so forth. And so I would venture to guess, back to your question, that it's really just they're looking at some work experience. Doesn't necessarily have to be in the area which they're applying. It is helpful, though, to have that. So, for example, if you had, I don't know, bookkeeping experience or training, then we likely would want you in the collection area, and so forth. If you worked at a collection agency, and so forth. Some of the other branches, it's more like it's, again, just some years of work experience and high school diploma or equivalent. Yeah.
Thank you. You mentioned earlier about some federal grant funding through the Office of Infrastructure Policy Development, and I think you were referring to BEAD grant money that you were hoping to get from that particular agency. How much was that funding, and again, what was it going to be used for?
I think it was $250,000, and it was going to be used to help us be able to have a mobile type of processing center. So it was something that we could put in a car and kind of go to the mayor's office and hook up, and so forth. But unfortunately, that's gone.
Okay. And so then I didn't particularly see it outlined in your budget regarding modernization plans, the implementation of new technology for tax processing, business registration, and online services. What are the budgetary needs, or what are the plans to modernize your systems?
Well, for example, in the securities area, we were hoping to be able to have payments made online for that. There are some branches that still rely, believe it or not, on field receipts. We want to move away from that. We want to be able to move away from having to print, all these forms. We would like, ideally, to have the forms pre-filled online, and then kind of like just when they come in. For example, driver's license, if we could do a pre-registration have the application pre-filled, we would like that to come in, and then we'd have a separate line really just for those that have done that, kind of like the airlines, it's your VIP line, and so forth. So we want to also be able to, we've typically been an agency that has relied a lot on paper. We have a lot of files, boxes, and so forth. And we want to be able to kind of scan a lot of that into, into the system, so that should there, God forbid, be some kind of natural disaster, that, we are protected with, or that information is protected. So it's some of the it's just an overall general effort to digitize and to try to automate. And in some cases, it's a matter of checking to see whether or not any contract with current vendors includes that scope of work or the additional project that we'd like to do. So that's just our general comment with regard to automation.
Okay. But you're not sure in the contracts that you do have in place whether or not it's included in the scope of work?
So sometimes there are things, you know, for example, is there a way that we can put, I'll give you an example, the 8-year driver's license or the 8-year option for driver's license, right? That actually has not yet been implemented because the vendor says that that is not part of the contract. We don't have a contract right now, but absent a contract, we can't even get that to be implemented. We are working that into the contract that we are drafting, you know, at this time. There are other, we currently have a different vendor that we would need, for example, if you needed a modification to the BPT form or the GRT form, then in most cases, when we ask if there is a change or there, you know, if it is possible, because we prefer not to try to get into additional cost, if it is at all possible, then they would let us know whether or not such a change is permitted under the current contract. So we really wouldn't know unless we actually check with the vendors, the respective vendors.
Okay. There was something else I saw in the budget here, this budget digest regarding office space rental. Mm-hmm. And the current level is 1.1 million, but then it drops to 478. Can you kind of explain that?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that in order to keep to the cap, or actually it shouldn't have been reallocated that way, but some of that drop is actually reflected in the contractual area. And we've since had a discussion with, with that. It should not have been, yeah.
I wanted to ask about the issuance of cannabis licenses and the Cannabis Control Board. Has there been any licenses? Can you give us an update on this program?
Okay. I didn't come with the cannabis information, but I will tell you this, that the choke point really has been on the utility side. So while people or responsible official licenses, if you will, or certifications have been issued, we've come to that point where some of them are waiting, depending upon what their end result or their end desire is, whether they're going to be a cultivator, whether they're going to be, you know, just retail, you know, selling retail and so forth. Some of the choke point really has been in the area of utilities. So for example, Waterworks is not able to sign off on the plans unless, you know, yeah, they're absolutely positive that it's not going to become a problem. And yet on the other side, the applicant is like, well, I won't know if there's a problem unless you come in and you sign off or you check on that. So that's the major hurdle that we face right now with regard to cannabis.
Okay. And if we were able to resolve these choke points, do you see this as a means to generate revenue?
Absolutely. Yep. And you know, I know that our brothers and sisters, you know, to the north, the CNMI, I believe that their industry has been pretty successful. At least that's the last that I've heard. You know, of course, ours is different in that we want to proceed carefully just to ensure that, you know, regulations are met and we comply with the law.
Okay. Thank you so much. And for the public that are watching, just because you're requesting a status quo budget, how can you assure the public that we're not going to see a status quo services? And when I say that, I mean like people who are waiting hours in line, just to get their driver's license renewed.
Rest assured, ma'am, we are working on that.
Thank you.
Sijus Masi, Senator Montanani. Senator Barnett, you're recognized.
Sijus Masi, Mr. Chair, Mananasiduos to the people of Guam watching, and thank you, Director Lizama, also Deputy Santos, and Mr. McHale. Good morning, Mr. McHale. How are you doing over there?
Good morning, Senator.
All right, thank you for joining us. Ma'am, I just had some questions for you. Thank you for the presentation and your testimony. But let's start with, are you able to share, maybe in a little more detail, efforts the agency has made to recruit and attract qualified individuals in the examination branch, which I know you know has experienced a high rate of turnover since 2021. And there was an audit released from the Office of the Public Auditor that reported there were only 8 examiners to enforce the tax laws for the entirety of the island. And then I guess part 2 of that, if you could also share what strategies are in place to address ongoing staffing shortages in critical agency areas such as the BPT branch, examination branch, driver's license, and the Technical Research and Appeals Bureau.
So let me answer the second of your question first. We've been working closely with DOA with regard to certification packets for those vacancies. I'm happy to say that within the last, certainly it's improved over the last year versus when I first came into the agency. So we do see certification packets from DOA, and we work with the person at DOA with regard to that. Some of the challenges that we've come across is, there's actually not, there are perhaps maybe just a few names on such packets, so it doesn't have the usual, 5 or what have you. We also run into people not wanting to even show up, or they just do a no-show on interviews, and or people actually being chosen for the job and then turning the job down. So some of those things, we can't control. We simply just try again. We ask DOA to simply put it out again, and so we hope that it will attract perhaps people who maybe didn't see it the first time. And so we are doing that. And then I'm sorry, you talked about, with regard to the examination team. It is certainly difficult also in that area because, as I mentioned earlier, in addition to having an accounting degree, then you also have to have a knowledge of tax, right? So what we found is we've lost some people to other areas, including DOA, where you get, you don't have to have a knowledge of tax and you actually get paid more. You get paid more for doing less. So that is something we continue to struggle with, but we do hope that this newly formed agreement with the University of Guam will result in potential, applicants.
That's always frustrating to hear when agencies lose personnel that they need to other agencies, and then you find that they're performing very similar duties, but the other agency is paying more. So with that being said, have you assessed, and it kind of sounds like the assessment is going to point to that, yes, you need to adjust current pay scales and make sure they're competitive enough to attract and retain qualified staff, particularly for like the technical positions like revenue agents and tax auditors. So is this something you need to have a conversation with Ed Byrne over at DOA?
Yeah, and actually the discussion has already started with the Tax Enforcement Division Administrator, who did point that out, that that's something that we likely will need to, we need to start. But, as with everything else, right, it's competing with a whole bunch of other things that have deadlines, and so forth. But with that said, we are certainly going to make time to try to address that.
How does the agency justify the current legal oversight that has resulted in delays or halted payments to critical service providers, such as the Aumentum impacting the real property tax and the Veritos impacting driver's license? It's my understanding, just based on concerns shared with me from employees, that these vendors are going through government claims for non-payment. So what's the plan to resolve these issues and reduce the burden on the agency's already short-staffed divisions and the public?
So with regard to some of the vendors, what we had discovered was, instead, and let's face it, right? People have said historically that a contract, or in lieu of a contract, purchase orders are simply done. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to ensure that we were following the procurement process properly. So in looking at some of those requests, we found that we needed to go out and do and execute a proper contract, actually put it out properly for bid and so forth. So, it's unfortunate, but Aumentum was one of those, it was affected by that. And then also the same thing with Veritos. Both vendors have been advised that, or to go through the government claim process, right? So that, I know that in the one vendor's case for driver's license Veritos, they actually did that, and we said, failing the existence of a current contract, you need to still do that for any of the months that you continue to provide service, for us. So they are aware of that. They continue to work with us. As I mentioned, the procurement team is working on an agreement right now to be able to carry us and hopefully bridge it such that there is no gap in service. And then the other thing is we are doing the same for the real property or Aumentum.
Can I ask, because it sounds like, just based on your testimony, that you lean heavily on the attorneys and the agency, so why wasn't this caught at the initiation of these engagements with these vendors?
Actually, that's why it happened, was because the attorneys turned around and said, no, we can't just do this as a PO again. You need to protect every dollar. Before any dollar is spent of the government's money, you need to ensure that you follow the proper steps. Now, some may disagree, with that, especially when you're given a purchase order, when the previous fiscal year's purchase order is now $150,000 more, then that, is cause for concern, right? I mean, so it was actually at the insistence or the advice of the attorneys that we go through the proper way or the proper process.
Are you able to share what's being done to open up the appeals officer position in TRAB? And what's the significance of this position, and what role does it play?
So Technical Research and Appeals Bureau, we informally call it TRAB. So we do have the administrator there, and she does have someone who assists her, with any of the work that is there. TRAB is kind of like, I've always kind of likened it, because I come from the outside, right? I've always kind of likened it to the Supreme Court, if you will, of DRT. So when people file their returns, if there is cause for it to be looked at, to have a secondary look, perhaps reviewed, that return, right, is sent over to the examination branch. If the examination branch renders a decision that is not accepted by the taxpayer, and the taxpayer wants to appeal, then it goes to TRAB. So, and then TRAB will make the decision. And while we do need to bring another person perhaps on board at TRAB, the more immediate need would be more so for examination. That is my viewpoint, because again, not many of the cases are turned over to TRAB.
If I may,
Please.
Senator, the expertise needed at TRAB would probably come from audit, and that's why, or examination branch, and that's probably why, you know, we're not stealing from audit to put people in TRAB. And Jennifer, who's the administrator for TRAB, she does pretty well by herself and her assistant, but yes, there is a need to fill it, but because exam is also understaffed, she's able to handle the workload right now.
I just wanted to echo some of the concerns shared with me from the staff relative to the vacancy of this position. And staff's telling me there's a huge possibility of reduced transparency and lack of internal accountability where decisions are inconsistent and unvetted. Madam Director, you made the comparison to it's like the Supreme Court of the agency. So I would just offer that in the Supreme Court, you know, if you don't like the decision, you appeal it. They definitely have personnel in place that mediate that process. So I'm not sure if it's another one of these positions that you have a hard time filling based on the qualifications, is it? Or the lack of interest in applicants?
Yes, yes. But, you know, going back to the earlier part of my presentation, I indicated our desire to get a taxpayer advocate. So I think by having one locally, then that's where the taxpayer is able to perhaps resolve some issues that may not be understood, you know, and so forth. And again, it's supposed to be an independent entity. So I think that should help.
Thank you. I know there are also some grumblings from the staff about the presentation of a status quo budget. I know one of my colleagues remarked here that, you know, they hope they're not going to get status quo services, but, you know, this whole conversation with the looming federal cuts and the Finance Committee's desire to, and other colleagues have also expressed a desire to cut, to right size. I just worry that, you know, coming in here in a status quo budget, I'm not sure if you're doing it because you don't want to step on anybody in the committee's toes, but what I'm seeing in the hearings that I've attended is that these agencies are not coming in here and saying status quo and everyone's going to be happy. They're coming in here with reduced or status quo budgets, and in my estimation, it's the services to the public that are being impacted. So, for example, you're coming in here with a status quo budget, and we're not sure that that's going to lead to improved services with the public, you know, especially because we're now entertaining a lot of legislation where we're exempting the, you know, our hardworking men and women in the armed forces. Now they don't have to go to DMV and wait in line for hours. The foreigners, now we're going to do a license reciprocity with them potentially. So who's going to DMV to line up? It's our local people. Mm-hmm. And so when I see this status quo budget, those are the things that I'm concerned about is, you know, you've with all due respect, it sounds like you're not entertaining the satellite office, right? And so I just wonder, how is this budget going to translate to, you know, shorter wait times at DMV, more improved services for the public? Because at the end of the day, I think that's the important thing that we're here for, is to ensure that you've got enough money to do what you got to do to improve, not hold status quo, not decrease. I mean, you're not decreasing staff, but I'm of the opinion that very obviously from what you're telling us, like, you need more funds to hire more people to do better things for the public.
So just to, you know, I wanted to just point out that we do have within the budget, right, the vacant funded positions, or perhaps recruitment in progress. And so those are what we are trying to concentrate, you know, on right now, because of course that is tied to the ability to better serve the public. You know, with regard to a status quo budget, we would love to have more funds, you know, if necessary, but I mean, not if necessary, but we absolutely wouldn't turn down additional money. Right. With that said, though, you know, we typically have come before, you know, even the previous, bodies. And we've actually had to work with what is handed down in the end. So I guess you could say, well, I'm pretty sure that there is perhaps disappointment that we didn't go, for higher. We had to take all different things into perspective, including having to work with a cap. So we are going to do our best. I think we've been able to provide the services and try to keep to our mission, and so forth. With regard to driver's licenses, we feel that the speaker's bill, which is now law, with regard to the non-resident military personnel and their dependents, that will help to reduce the congestion at our office in Magaʹhågan. We feel that continuing with an educational campaign to get people to renew online, or perhaps, not wait until the day before your birthday, or your birthday to renew, that we can be able to kind of manage that crowd, if you will. So.
I know you spoke very briefly on the satellite office, right? And I thought that was a great idea. Many people in the public enjoyed that, and it was right over at Guåhan Shopping Center.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So what's the cost of that if we were to, increase your budget to allow you to open the satellite office? I mean, first of all, do you think it's necessary, and then what would the cost be?
I'll let Michelle handle that, since I wasn't around when that satellite was there.
One of the reasons we closed the satellite offices was we open at 8, and the mall doesn't open till 10, 11. So they don't turn on the air conditioner until the mall opens. They turn off the escalator and the elevator. And of course, we have handicapped and old people wanting to get a driver's license or ID. And we've had some of them fall because they've had to climb the stairs, things like that.
Right.
And then it's just the building itself. We get smells from the beauty shop that, make people sick. I remember when Payless closed in Magaña, they had a backhoe in there, and the fumes from the backhoe were coming up to our main branch. So we just felt it was time to close that. But the portable driver's license mobile units that we wanted to buy with this infrastructure money are such that you can pull them out of a van or a pickup. They fold out, right? And you can have 2 stations, with the camera to take your picture, the signature pad, the computer, because we'd have to hook up to...
So that's going to be the satellite office?
Well, that was one of the thoughts with that infrastructure money, but, right now it's on hold because we lost that money.
Yeah.
But as far as looking for another...
yeah, because it kind of sounds like the issues you were having weren't necessarily with the concept or the idea of a satellite,
no, it's just
DRT, DMV office. It was just specific to the vendor.
Yeah.
Right, I see. So is there anything, if you put out a bid and you say, hey, you got to run the aircon all the time, you got to have a working escalator, then what would that estimated cost be?
I don't know what it costs us to keep that satellite office at Guåhan Shopping Center. But, when we moved to online and mail-in applications for driver's licenses, that has been working. Like a good processor, and if the application is in order, she can process up to 70 licenses a day, and then she mails it out the next day. So that works. If everything is complete, meaning to say your eye examination is there, you sign the form, you provide the right information.
Error-free.
Error-free, exactly.
Yes,
so, those are the kind of things that move things along. And 80 cards we process is less 80 people at the line, And then it, depends too on, being a driver's license examiner is very, it's hard work. You get people snapping at you all the time. I mean, there's a lot of pressure. But, and they don't get a break. And if somebody doesn't come in, the workload gets harder. So, you know, they don't get a break. They don't get a break at all from 8 to 5, just their lunch. You know, they don't take their breaks. And we have people complaining all the time because they're outside at 4 in the morning.
Right, yeah, we get a lot.
Nobody tells them to come at 4 in the morning, but they do.
Right.
Yeah, so, you know, it's a catch-22 situation. We're, you know, working our hardest to figure out how to make this work. We thought the satellite or mobile driver's license, it works in the States, you know, we thought that would...
yeah, that's unfortunate that that was cut by President Trump.
Yeah, so
One of those.
Anyway.
Right, and then back to what I said earlier, you know, perhaps if we can solicit help from the mayors, maybe what they can do, kind of like when we did the All Rise program. I know for a fact that one of the mayors, Mayor Hoffman, thank you very much, you know, he encouraged his constituents to come to his office and he helped them navigate through the application process. You know, so if we could solicit their help, that's certainly another thing that we can look at doing, you know, just for those who don't have access to computers, that is. They can come in, they can go, and they can renew or replace.
I just want to say, too, that a lot of our customers, they're old and they're maybe don't have a computer at home, so it's hard for them, and that's why they come in. You know, they want to do it the old-fashioned way. They want to pay. They want to hold that driver's license in their hand when they leave. So it's you know, it's a hindrance to the process, but that's the way they are sometimes, so that we have to take that into account.
Yeah, and those are the people that I'm asking these questions for, you know, right, so we had a family friend whose auntie was in line all day, and it's so bad sometimes that you have to go and do a snack run, like, oh, go give auntie water, oh, go drop her snacks, because she's been waiting in line for so long, but that's a service that the agency offers, so I don't think that we should not penalize, or I'm trying to be careful with my words, because I know they work very hard. I know a bunch of the people in driver's license examination. But if we're going to offer that service, especially to our elderly who don't want to go online, who, you know, they don't trust the internet, they want to come in, then we have to ensure that, you know, we're delivering it in the best way for the public. And it just doesn't sound like this status quo budget. You know, I appreciate how creative you're getting and talking about involving the mayors and pushing the online renewal more, but I think the fact remains that as a legislature, if we're going to decide as a policy that we want to cut all these costs, I think we have to ensure that the people of Guam don't pay the price for that, and that's just my concern. With all due respect. But, you know, generally, ma'am, I did want to share with you that in speaking with employees, there is satisfaction that there's been a lot of things that have been stabilized at DRT since you've assumed directorship. So I did want to end on that. And Mr. McHale, thank you for joining us. I almost want to ask you a question since they made you come up here. You good? Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to speak and to the hardworking employees of the Department of Revenue and Taxation. Thank you.
Senator Barnett. Senator Gumatauta, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Marie and your team, for being with us this morning. And I just have a few questions, and I know it's probably stuck to this idea of the status quo budget, but let me just ask if your FY26 budget request is based on an employer retirement contribution rate, going back to your employee retirement and medical benefits. If it's based on that 34.80%, what information is available at this point confirming whether the contribution rate will further increase? And if this were to occur prior to the new fiscal year, how exactly will DRT absorb the additional cost?
You're right. We don't know whether or what, you know, whether or not or how much of an increase we may be looking at with regard to that particular that particular, item. With regard to what may happen in the event of an increase, that's just simply something we're going to have to go back and reshift, and Mikhail can chime in here if he knows. I do know that when we had the budget earlier this year, when we were handed the initial draft, we were told later that he needed to find a way to include the increase in the government share of the insurance premium. And of course, we weren't happy with that, because we said, that was typically something that was accounted for or perhaps addressed outside of the agency. But this was a little bit different. And so that is just, something we're going to have to, we hope we don't come into. I think Mr. Chair indicated that there may be a little bit of positive news there. And so you're right. I mean, that's just something that we hope we don't have to address.
All right, thank you so much, Marie. Let's talk a little bit about I guess call it office leases or the like, but when we think about your facility needs, what specific efforts have been made by the agency during this current fiscal year to secure a new location, knowing that it was reported in late 2023 during the previous year that the former head of the agency had mentioned that DRT was entering its last year on the lease for the old facility that you're in today, which has some issues, and I think it's well reported on some of the different issues there. But when we think about maybe a new location, is there anything you can share with us today?
That is one of the projects that the procurement team is working on right now, is to go ahead and put something out for bid. The challenge, and we've been told by people outside of the agency, and in particular those familiar with real estate, have indicated that what we are looking for is going to be a challenge. So we're looking for 55,000 square feet to house our agency. And I believe it's 200 parking slots. So there isn't, we've been told flat out that there likely isn't anything that's available out there. So we may have to regroup, but I'm sorry, that alternative thinking is going to be taken into consideration as we put the bid together. So, whether we have to maybe have different or be housed differently from motor vehicle division, but ideally we'd like everybody to be together.
Yeah,
that's fair.
We listen to our employees, and that's the one thing they stress, is that they would like to stay together. In the past, we've been broken up and put in different buildings, and that doesn't work. And it's also a hassle for the taxpayer, because if you need to get clearance, you have to go to different locations, right? Right now, you're just housed under one. So even with our little satellite office of vehicle registration being away from us, I feel the difference. They're not included. Marie and I rarely get there, those kind of things. So they feel left out, and rightfully so, but the employees want to stay together. They feel the department runs better if we're all under one building.
All right, thank you for sharing. And yes, get out and see your people more. I would tell you that today. With the appropriation of $4.7 million at FY 2025 for credit card fees, which promotes this cashless and arguably timely and efficient settlement of government obligations, what has been your experience at DRT in coordination with the Treasurer of Guam with respect to the collection of taxes and other government fees, recognizing this cashless form of payment, which I guess it's probably safe to say that it has improved revenue collections overall since 2020?
I think, first of all, when you use a credit card, I mean, it has been, the late Bertha Duenas did, say she actually wasn't a proponent of waiving those credit card convenience fees, although we did tell her we preferred that credit cards be used because if someone pays us by check, you're likely going to run into the risk of it not having sufficient funds. So I think it's great. I think we came to some kind, or it was good that there was some kind of compromise in that it would only apply to individual transactions or an individual's transaction as opposed to that of a business. So we feel that being able to do a credit card, particularly if you're dealing with a website, then it saves the taxpayer or the customer the hassle of having to physically come into our office or into the Treasurer of Guam, locations. With that said, there is, and I will be very candid with you, there is, we've discovered an issue in that some transactions, the system is not able to distinguish between an individual's transaction and a company's transaction. So therefore, but we are aware of the situation and we are working closely with the Treasurer of Guam to kind of correct that or rectify that situation.
All right, thank you, Marie. Let's talk about use taxes for just a minute. An OPA report back 10 years ago, number 1501, outlined recommendations to DRT and the Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency to implement you guys working together to establish written exemption procedures which should be incorporated in some kind of interagency cooperative agreement. The OPA provided procedures like a list of business license numbers expiring, other relevant information, conducting independent reviews, providing an opinion to CQA on the treatment of certain goods and determining whether certain goods are taxed or exempted for use tax, and conducting periodic reviews of exemptions that are granting by clearing officers on the CQA side. What is the status of the use tax interagency cooperative agreement, and what recommendations, if any, does DRT have at this point to strengthen existing processes that are outlined in the agreement, ensuring engagement and follow-through with CQA on a regular basis?
So the discussion that we had with CQA was such that we would share a working document in order to be able to track those individuals who would, who have ordered goods and so forth. And so we've implemented that process. It's not where we want it to be. And admittedly, that hails back to the shortage of staff at BPT. As Michelle mentioned, the staff, in addition to what they currently do right now, they also carry out bonded warehouse inventory checks. And so, that's something that we know needs to be done and, just needs to be addressed.
Okay, so, and speaking of that, just a bit of a transition. There was an OPA report 2302 back in February of 2023. This is, again, relative to the assessments and collections of excise tax for alcoholic beverages and tobacco products. They had a whole bunch of different findings in it and had put forward recommendations to you all. And at a time when this particular legislature is addressing BPT-related measures, including discount for Medicaid providers and the restoration of the 4% rate, what information can you share at this point that will help ensure that taxes owed to the government are in fact paid, particularly considering, and I'll just mention this, the special funds report for April 2025 showed the Healthy Futures Fund was tracking to collect below the adopted levels by around $897,000.
With regard to Healthy Futures Fund, we've been asked that question before, for the reason for the downward trend. We are actually at a loss as to why that is trending downward. One of the comments has been perhaps that more of the smokers are now vaping. You know, there have been arguments as to whether or not that is an accurate statement, but we aren't sure why, that is. Vaping, right now, we don't currently track vaping. That is reported on the GRT form. It is not sectioned out, so we're not entirely sure if that shift is accurate. And then with regard to, the actual tax and reporting, we need to have people assigned to ensure that anything that, comes in is properly assessed and collected. So, again, it just hails back to, we need help in that area. And we're trying our best. I believe the interviews that we did just recently were for 2 people in that area, so we just need to make sure that they get trained.
Okay, thank you, Marie. And Mr. Chair, I only have one last question. And when you look at your budget and there's a 0 for equipment, when I think about investment years ago with the scanners, when we talked about paper-based for a lot of things at Rev and Tax, and the scanning of like past documents, whether it be corporate or whether it be individual tax returns, with a 0 equipment cost, I know there's been a lot of gains on the electronic side, and I'm a big fan, so I think it's great. I heard earlier, though I wasn't here, as I was tracking it on YouTube, about we're trying to make improvements when we can. Are those systems still in play? Are you looking at perhaps a modernization at some point? It's 2025. I figured at some point some of the computers from years ago may start to go down, servers and the like. So if I just wanted to end with that, and I know it's 0 now, but I hope there's a game plan down the road for maybe some modernization of some of these assets.
So what we have as part of our procurement requests that are currently in the system, the GSA system, there are computers, up. So there's definitely equipment there that we are simply waiting on to have action taken, rather. And so we do have some of those things already, hopefully coming soon.
All right, thank you so much, Marie, and thank you for your team for being here. Mr. Chair, thank you. That's all the questions that I have. Thank you again for your service.
Senator Gumitato. Senator Perez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Director Lizama, Acting Deputy Santos, and Mikel. Thank you for being here. So I just want to follow up with the budget that we passed for 2025. And in the budget, there was amendments that were added for reporting requirements on the use of lapses. I don't see anything on our messages and communications. Has DRT complied with that part of the budget law to identify how many lapses and expenditures within 30 days of those lapses?
I know that we had given an initial report to then Speaker Terlahi with regard to how the unexpended funds. And the truth is we did not, because we were trying to set up the revenue agent training, which has since been delayed by, first of all, trying to identify the instructors that would be able to come in, and as well as what's happened recently. We have not expended any of that for training, so we did not give a follow-up on that.
So was there any expenditures of the lapses?
So we were told that there's a certain amount, but the problem that we found was that, and Michelle can attest to this, the figure that we had differed from what the system showed. So the figure we were given by DOA differed from BBMR and was showing as either 0 or in the negative on the system side. And so Mikhail knows that I've kind of bugged him about that every time, but he says the way the system was set up, he was not able to get beyond a certain point in order to properly, request usage of the funds.
So how much did DOA state how much you had? And then BBMAR said basically you had nothing, right? So how much did DOA give you?
So if I'm not mistaken, months ago we were given 2.2 million, but, and Mikhail can chime in here, he says that that's, not what was showing in the system.
Okay, Mikhail, if you can add to that. So in the system, we're talking about the old AS400, or are we talking about the new GFMIS system?
Yes, Off-a-day Senator, for our prior year and our current system and budgeting, we completely moved to the new DOA system, which is in many ways like more efficient, especially for our recently we moved to our payroll, and it's getting more efficient with the time and the processing. The expended funds. Yes. Yes. The discrepancy is with only the prior year accounts. So that's FY24 and below. So most of our funding right now, the available funds are from the FY25 local and special funds. But for the FY24, yes, we're getting different numbers because there's the FMIS side and then the data warehouse side where it's not integrating and it's not showing the proper available funds for when we expend, when we transfer the expenditures to DOA for the processing of the payments. And just recently, so they do have the correct available funds, but for the accounting, it's not able to be processed. So recently we were able to request for an override for the big contracts for using FY24 funds. So it is there are funds available, and we're not able to process it as we normally would.
Okay, so I guess the question is, have you investigated where this $2.2 million went?
It's still there, but it has been gradually being expended. Yes, with the override requests.
So has BBMAR given you the guarantee that you were going to get that $2 million that hasn't been reconciled?
Our understanding is yes, but that figure was given to us quite a while ago, so we know that that figure is definitely not the current one.
But if it hasn't been expended by DRT, who's spending that money?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. What I meant was the balance would have been affected. So we found out later that we were going to, in order for the expense to occur, there had to be some kind of override. And so there was an override, in certain cases. And so what I guess what I'm just trying to say is that the balance is not in the millions.
Okay, so, can you explain override, the process of override?
So apparently, as Mikhail mentioned, there was disconnect between the new system and the data warehouse. And so what we found out was that we needed to just kind of give a snapshot of what it was we were trying to expend and give it over to DOA. Who is it? Yeah. DOA accounting office. and then they would be able to override. I don't know what their actual process, would be, but it was a function that was at their side.
Okay, this is concerning. It seems like you need some accounting experts on your team to review what exactly is happening, because $2 million is a lot of money.
I believe Mikhail has a running, what we've resorted to is a kind of an accounting, if you will, on our side, but it's also a matter of reconciling with DOA accounting.
Okay, yeah, please look into that. The other thing I've noticed in your budgets, last budget and this budget, you allocated 0 overtime. But when we look at the budgets that are today, it's actually registering at a last budget cycle. It's registering an amount, both this upcoming budget cycle and last budget cycle. So there's several questions regarding that. Where did you find the money to pay for the overtime? And who is getting the overtime? And how do you determine where overtime is needed? This is an entity that closes at, roughly at 5. So where is this overtime going to?
Okay, so with regard to where the overtime money comes from, part of it was the unexpended funds, correct, Mikhail? Okay, I stand corrected. He said that it was pulled from salaries and benefits, for as part of the budget. With regard to who, I'm sorry.
Can you clarify that, because it's coming from the budget? So is it coming from the vacant funded positions, or where is it coming from?
Yes, so when we fund the overtime, we would send a request for budget modification, and depending on the area that needs, say, the taxpayer services or income tax for the deadlines, we'll request if there's showing a projected shortfall for the taxpayer services division, so we could fund the need for the overtime.
So in the budget, it outlines exactly where you're going to get what you're going to fund, right, and how much you're going to fund. So are you getting so you're getting from the taxpayers division? You're getting this money to pay overtime from the taxpayers division, but it's outside of what you've already what we appropriated. Is that correct, or can you explain that further?
Yes, that's correct. We historically haven't been funding for the overtime in line with the budget requests, and it's more on we'll send a request for the overtime when the need arises.
It doesn't make sense to me, because in your budget there's no 0 overtime. So where is the money that we appropriated coming from to pay for overtime?
So I think what Mikhail's trying to say is he simply just moves, requests to move it from one area to another. And ma'am, if I may say,
so if you're moving it from one area, let's say there's a warm body there, how can you get money from that position? All right, so that's why I'm asking, are you getting it from funded vacant positions? Is that what's happening?
Yes, right? Yes.
Senator, I believe that's what he's doing. He looks for where there's where there's money, he takes it and he covers the overtime. Every year we use overtime to process tax returns and to get, to within the 6 weeks or within the 4 weeks of processing time. We don't have enough staff to do this from 8 to 5, so we work a couple of hours each day, and then on Saturdays they work from, I believe, 7 or 8 to 4. So that's the overtime. And it's usually EDP, which is electronic data processing, and income tax, and some other staff that has been trained to process tax returns, they also contribute. So that's how we take care of the overtime, even though it's not budgeted.
It also includes, ma'am, the weekly testing of the, what is it, heavy equipment?
Driver's license.
Driver's license.
They
yeah.
test on Saturdays, almost every Saturdays, for bus drivers and truck drivers.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe that's paid by the entity. Like the company requesting the testing, they'll pay the overtime of the examiners.
But it would
that's
also
covered.
include any extra Saturdays based on the issue during the week.
Yeah.
So this also hampers your ability to hire then positions because you're using money from vacant funded positions.
I think MISCELL works in close concert with BBMR to ensure that that's not the case. Again, the case really is in attracting people or having them apply for the actual positions.
Yeah, I see there's a problem here because if you're using funding that's supposed to be for positions, unless it's in the budget, right now it's zero overtime.
Senator, if you look at the listings from DOA for those positions, you'll find that there's one or two people applying. So I don't think our overtime is hampering our ability to hire.
Okay, so in looking over your staffing pattern, this is doing an oversight that I had. In DRT's heyday, there were 52 staff, or actually 55 was its heyday in 2013.
In a particular area, ma'am?
In the tax enforcement division.
Yep.
In 2023, it's down to 36.
Yeah.
What is it currently now today, and what is your goal to address this shortfall or short
Okay, I'm
staffing?
going to have MISCELL calculate that, but our goal again is really to ensure that we work on the recruitment particularly for exam, and as well as some of the branches in the taxpayer services division. So as I mentioned, we took your advice from, actually, I don't know if you were here, but we took your advice from last year, and we did enter into an agreement with the University of Guam's CBPA, particularly in the accounting area, to try to get some kind of internship going. The fact of the matter is it's been difficult to recruit, particularly for exam, when the requirement that is needed is both a 4-year college degree in accounting plus tax expertise. And so we are trying to we're trying to do it such that there would be more interest in the position via stuff like that, via the internships, and so forth. It certainly is not, attributed to our lack of trying. It's really just difficult. We lost people who retired. We had one who went active duty. We actually had one who went to accounting, tried to come back, and then said it's okay because she was getting paid more at DOA. So we continue to struggle with things like that, and we're just hoping that we can, try to at least address that in perhaps an alternate form, and that's really to get people to become familiar with, the work that's being done there.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for following up on the recommendations. And then, again, I do want to encourage you to work out the successional planning. Like my colleagues have stated, a lot of the workers there have become experts, and it's really maybe boosting through training that we can they can get promotions, right? That's one way to assure the positions are filled through promotions and training tied together.
Yes, ma'am, that is the plan. The plan is to offer higher level positions so that people can move up. And then the former or the entry positions that they were formerly holding would hopefully be filled by new applicants.
Okay, thank you. And also with GCC, I do concur with my colleagues on that one too as well, as far as following up with potentially a program that can segue into, the degrees. And just to also point out one of the lack of the challenges that you guys are facing is the pay grade. So DOA for a similar position gets paid $7,000 more, unfortunately. So yeah, the above step.
For doing less stressful work.
Yeah, so the above step is really called for.
No criticism to DOA. They've been trying to do their best to help us. And I'm sorry, Senator, let's go back to that number. You're asking about the number of positions? So 1, 2, 3, we actually have 6 that are open recruitment and progress right now, particularly on the examination side. Okay. We do have some that are vacant but not funded, and we're just kind of keeping that as a placeholder. Hopefully we'll be able to, to increase the number as we promote people.
Okay, thank you. Okay. The other questions I have regarding, again, the lease, it wasn't clear to me. And when I look at the budget, can you explain why the reduction or how that reduction occurred? I mean, are you still going to be at the facility in the coming year?
Well, we expect that, realistically, we will still be there as we try to work out something that'll go out for bid. The reduction actually, or the reduced amount, part of that, or I should say, what was the previous amount was included under contractual. And so I've had a discussion with Mikkel already about how that should be a fixed amount, and therefore any movement between accounts should not have been done that way, and therefore, lead to confusion.
Okay, and so the rent is still, what's the rent then? Is it going to be the 1 million, same as last year? Okay, and so that means there's a reduction in contractual services. So where was that reduction?
Could I go back to that question regarding the funding for the rent? For the general fund, we fund just based on the budget ceilings. We only put around 8 months for 6 to 8 months for the under the 233 rental, and then for the remaining months, I shifted it towards the special fund, but it's currently under contracts. But looking back, if we're gonna allot it, we're gonna request to actually create a new object class 233 for where there's funds under the Tax Collection Enhancement Fund and the Better Public Service Fund. To create, but currently right now, the remaining months for the rent, which is still the same amount per month, is under the contract section, under the 96A section.
Okay, and so it's paid by special fund?
The remaining, yes.
The remaining, okay. So you're not reducing any contractual services?
No.
How does that happen?
Just I didn't when I was preparing the budget, I should have put it under 233, but I was looking through the prior budgets, and for the special fund, tax collection, and better public, there historically hasn't been an object class for the 233 rental, which we'll request for to make it more specific for the rent.
Yeah, it doesn't add up though. To me, it's not. If you're taking from the contractual side, that means there's a reduction in service. Your reduction in contracts. But maybe we could talk about this outside of this. Yeah, to me, it's not balanced. Okay, procurement training, ethics training. What is the status of that with your personnel?
For our ethics training, in communication with the Guam Ethics Commission, we provide them the status of the mandatory ethics compliance. We provide them the reports of which is how many employees, and it's tracking good, but there are some who still need to take the ethics.
Because we've had some new hires, and but I do know that we've had a fairly high percentage of those who've taken that mandatory training. With regard to procurement, there are a few of us in the admin side. We mostly have procurement. We've taken Module 1. I think Michelle's probably the only one that has taken all 4 modules. And we hope to be able to take the other modules, at least for those of us that hold Module 1 or have gone through Module 1. We hope to be able to do that. Right now, we're really under the, it's kind of like out of our control because it depends on when these classes are offered, and most times they're already filled. So we hope to, yeah, they fill up fast, and of course, that is of importance.
Yeah, that's important, especially considering the challenges for procurement that DRT's faced. The other thing is Public Law 3760 in regards to abandoned vehicles. Part of DRT's role was to place information regarding vehicles that have been removed. What is the status of that?
So we've had I would say maybe twice monthly meetings. We've had it over at GPD's training room, and so it involves GPD, Department of Land Management, EPA, DRT, and DPW. And the last meeting, I missed the last meeting. However, I understand that there is one on July 3. What we were working on during those meetings was just a clear indication, a clearer indication of who needs to do what. We ultimately knew that some of us had to work on this side with certain things, like, for example, DRT needed to work on a form at the suggestion of GPD to be patterned much like their transfer of property form. And so we've been working on that. We actually requested for an amendment, to the law to be introduced. And that's because our staff was concerned about there being language in there wherein we would appraise or kind of sell off, right? Was that, yeah. And so those drafts, the edits have been made. I just saw the draft the other day, and we are going to share that at the next meeting. In the meantime, we did talk about once a peace officer has identified an abandoned vehicle, we talked about the process of how they would inform us, and then we would actually upload that information on the website as stated in the law. So it's there. We're working on it, ma'am. There has been, we feel there's been some progress with regard to it, and that I think the biggest hurdle really was the identification of land for staging. So.
Okay, appreciate that update.
Yeah.
Looking forward to its
Rest assured,
implementation.
we are. It has not been forgotten.
Right, thank you. And then who's charged with addressing or FOIAs, RFIs, and updating SOPs in DRT?
So the updating of SOPs, I had asked legal to take a look at that. Of course, that would be in concert or in coordination with the division administrators. And so we have made progress in some areas, but there is definitely more work to be done. With regard to FOIAs, we have someone who is she's not the official. At one point in time, we did have a position called the disclosure officer. But what we've done right now is we have given that responsibility over to the examination supervisor. And so she acts as she receives the Sunshine Act requests or FOIA requests, and she is the one that coordinates with the respective the respective branch or branch supervisor, and then it's sent.
So the exam branch is challenged, personnel challenged. Why isn't it at the director's office? Why isn't the FOIA handled at the director's office?
Well, typically what happens is we're both included in that, but she is the one that coordinates the gathering of documents that are being requested.
Okay, and I'm getting a constituent request or a concern that it's taking about 6 months or more to get a license plate for new vehicles. Are you aware of that?
So at one point in time, we were affected by the supply chain issue. And of course, that has improved. And what we found was we made the mistake of waiting for that supply to come in. And what we should have done, and we are now doing, is before the supply gets depleted, we put out a request for a new order, so to speak. So to my understanding, there is no critical issue as compared to when we had the supply chain one. But I know that maybe an order ago or so, the delay really was at the vendor side.
Okay, so I just want to go over the budget too again. And looking at 2025 versus 2026, though there are some increases and decreases as you go down the list in the supplemental budget before you. And so I guess the numbers aren't much for the tax enforcement. Real property isn't that much. Or what is the change due to, the increase due to for tax enforcement, real property, taxpayer services, regulatory? So the only one that decreased executive direction, but for everything else it increased. So, but not by much. So what is those increases? What are they due to?
It's mainly due to the increase in the government share of the insurance premiums.
Okay. And not by increase in paid positions?
No. Okay. I would love to give them all a raise.
Or to add more people to the team, is that because we've talked about the shortage, so it's really a status quo staff pattern, basically. Okay. One more thing, regards to your unclassifieds. You have 27. I guess why the high number of unclassifieds?
So I believe that we have a total of 16 LTAs, right? They're all counted in that group. We have a total of 4 special projects coordinators, Included in that mix also is the Motor Carrier Assistance Program staff. So that's basically what makes up that list of, and then we have about 3 retirees that were rehired.
And then the lawyers too?
Only one of the lawyers is unclassified.
Okay.
The other 2 are classified.
Interesting. All right, in the budget it says they're all 3 unclassified.
No, that needs to be corrected. One is the principal income tax attorney. Her position's actually unclassified.
Okay. And do any of them have tax background?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Like I said, it's difficult to even find an attorney with a tax LLM, an attorney that would be willing to come out of private practice to go into government or public sector. And that's why those positions were largely vacant this whole time.
Okay, so thank you, Director, for your responses and for your participation today, and Acting Director as well as Mikkel. Appreciate it. And for all the work that you guys are doing. Sis Masi.
Sis Masi, Senator Paris. And so we are close to 1 minute before lunch, so I am not going to be the one to stand in between you and going out and having a great lunch. I wanted to mention one thing before I read my closing, is that many agencies, while we appreciate seeing the bright, shiny faces of the employees and the like, we can see how busy you are because there's nobody behind you except the 3 of you today. So we want to congratulate all of your employees up there for the hard work they're doing, keeping the operation running, and of course, with the work that you're putting forward and with a very acceptable presentation that you brought forward, Director.
Thank you, sir. They do work hard.
Absolutely.
I wish I could do more for them, but you know, they continue to plug along, and I believe that that's because the vast majority of them love what they do, and they love the agency.
That's my experience every time I go up there, and that's experience that I get from family and friends who remark as well. Very professional organization. Thank you very much. So with that, this will conclude this morning's budget hearing on Bill 44-38 COR relative to the Department of Revenue and Taxation. The committee will continue to accept written testimony on the bill within 7 calendar days from today, which may be addressed to myself, Senator Christopher M. Dueñas, as chairman of the committee, or mailed to 163 West Chalan-Tontopapa, Magaña, 96910. You may also send your testimonies to my email at senator.dueñas@guamlegislature.gov. This morning's budget hearing is now adjourned, and the time is 1200. Sis Masi.